Welcome back to another episode of the Whiskey House Pub House. My name is Dylan, and today we're going to be reviewing a new whiskey from Found North. Hoverhawk. Now, I have not had anything up to this point from Found North. Whiskey Boy and I did a podcast about a week ago that is probably out by now, where we tried the Hoverhawk to the Batch 10. Batch 10 heard amazing things about, and I won this bottle in Found North's lottery, and up to that point had not heard much about it. But I kind of got into it a little bit, so I already know. Spoilers, it's really good. So, enough of that. Let's pour some, aerate. I got this tape from this last episode, and if you see the Crown Royal bag behind me, go check out the last episode. I don't know what it's called. Still coming up with a name for the series, but if you got one, leave a comment down below. So this Found North, what they're doing is really cool, by the way. They are blenders, producers, sourcing whiskey from Canada. And they're rescuing this Canadian whiskey, bringing it down, and blending, further maturing, and finishing certain things based off of profile and what they're wanting to do. So Canada, it kind of brings into a little bit of a discussion, a little nerd stuff. Canada typically distills their grain separately. Now, what that means is, let's take for instance a typical American mash bill of, like, let's say it's 80% corn. Was it 20? 71-21. 71-21. Let's look at a traditional American bourbon mash bill of 71-21 for something. I think, does that equal 100? I think so. That might be. Might not be. Of a bourbon. So traditionally, to be a bourbon, you have to be at least 51%, right? So they'll use a big portion of corn, and their second highest, typically, actually they call it the flavoring grain, which could be anywhere from a 20 to sometimes even just a high teens, maybe even lower. And then you typically have malted barley. Now, the malted barley traditionally isn't used for flavoring. It's used to kickstart the fermentation process because it has naturally high amounts of enzymes in there that yeast can break down easily. But if they have that malted barley and they have enough of it, it will help the yeast, and they will actually convert more of the sugars into alcohol. Canada will typically use only one, maybe just two grains in their distilling process. So they'll use like an 80 or 90% corn, a little bit of barley, or just use liquid enzyme to help that break down those sugars. And then they'll distill 100% rye or something, and then maybe a barley. So it kind of gives them options down the line to blend, because they're not making their recipe when they're distilling. They're going to make the recipe in blending. If that makes sense. That's definitely not the best explanation of Canadian whiskey, but that's my explanation. Now, we enter Found North. What they are doing is they are procuring excess barrels that distilleries in Canada might not want. They're purchasing them, and they're bringing them down here. So they might have a couple barrels that are near 100% corn, a couple barrels that are near 100% rye, and maybe some that are barley. And so they'll take that and make a blend out of it. Now, The breakdown of this is 15-year rye whiskey, 18-year rye whiskey, 22-year corn whiskey, 23-year corn, 24-year corn, and 27-year corn whiskey blended in there. So they're kind of making their own like mash bill in a way by blending it. Not really, but so they do list the grain on here. 90% of the blend is corn, 9 is rye, and 1 is barley. 61.6% alcohol. Now this is also matured or aged further, married in Moscatel wine and new American oak barrels. Now, from my brief research of Moscatel wine, and hopefully I remembered what it was pronounced or how, it is a Muscat wine. That's the limit of my research. But it is really tasty. So it was a good blend. This is bottle 4,301, so there was at least that many. All right, smell it. Ooh, raisin chocolate. It's a little cold. It's been sitting in this back room for a while. Now, obviously, this is minimum, or the youngest whiskey in here is the age statement, so it's age stated 15 years, but it's 90% corn, and the youngest corn whiskey in here is 22 years. It's 90% at least 22-year corn whiskey, and there's 9% rye in this. There's a lot of old stuff in here. Now, the SRP on this was $159.99, and I got this through their online lottery system, so I was fortunate enough to purchase. Now, $160 is expensive. Don't get me wrong. But the aged stock that went into this at cask strength, and then you added a finishing barrel and a new oak barrel, it's kind of a bargain if you think about it. Obviously, it doesn't hold up at all if the flavor isn't there to back it up. So we'll smell in the nose one more time, and then we'll go to the palate and see, does it stack up to the SRP? It's got a nice brown sugar too, also, and sarsaparilla. If you watch the other episode I did with the samples, I talked about sarsaparilla a little bit and how that gets me going. Let's taste it. It's like you took a root beer and you made a simple syrup out of it. You just condensed it down until you got this rich molassesy sarsaparilla root beer, and then you added a bunch of booze to it. Just made it delicious. Now, at the first taste, I didn't get any wine, and Muscat wine I'm not familiar with. So I'm not really picking out the specific influence that added to it, but I don't really care. It's delicious. The new oak is adding such a spicy, complex, and an enjoyable amount of oak to the flavor. It is very heavy-handed on the oak, at least compared to, I guess, other bourbons. But I love that. And maybe I'm wrong too on that. Maybe it's not necessarily just the oak influence on it, but it's there, and I love it. And the nose is just like a sweet, maybe a little bit of bubble gum too, like a hubba bubba. Second sip. I almost forgot to even pay attention. It's so enjoyable. Cinnamon, just allspice, and it just coats everything. It's like baking. It's like a It's like a nice cinnamon roll and less on the sugar because it's spicy. Yeah, kind of like fresh cinnamon rolls. It's pretty great. Yeah, I would probably get another bottle if I could. Maybe I'll see one. I have not seen any Found North products in Minnesota before. Not to say that they don't get around, but I'm assuming this is a little bit of a harder release to find. Rochester, New York. That's where it's from. I was trying to think of where on the East Coast these guys are from. If you're in that area, go check them out. If they have a storefront, I'm not sure if they do. Otherwise, I know Randall, Whisky Shaman, had a podcast with them. If you're interested, definitely go check that out. And any of his other stuff he does a lot of cool podcast interviews with whiskey producers. So if you're familiar with Found North, there's a good chance he's probably done other stuff that you'd be interested in. Last sip, and then we're going to shut this thing down. I think I do see a little bit more of the wine influence. It's kind of adding this sweet, viscous note to it, or feel. I wonder if this would be a lot more spicy without the wine. Whatever, I mean, it needed it. I can't imagine without that needed part, if that makes sense. It's so unified in the flavor profile that if something was out of place or they just didn't put it in, I think it would have been unbalanced. This is just how well this is put together. Is this feels completely balanced. I can't imagine it any other way. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Whiskey House Pub House. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Leave me a comment. Maybe a recommendation if you want me to review something. But that'll do it. We'll see you next time.